worth your while. So give me your all. I'll take it to Mars. Oh, I'll stick like glue inside your mind. Just watch me break it. And I swear you're falling into me. Touch me. I swear you would do anything that I want. So keep us awake till the dawn. Baby, feel free. I wanna make you sweat on me. I wanna make you sweat on me.
Good afternoon to all of you coming to us from the East Coast. You have joined and you have traveled all the way through to South Africa, to Cape Town, after the previous session that was hosted in London and Singapore. My name is Daryn Smith. I am the Chief Strategy Officer here at Huble Digital. And welcome to the third year of Grow with Inbound. This is the first time we're doing a completely virtual event. The last two were in central London. And we thought, it would be really good to do this virtually. Coincidental that everybody is doing virtual events, but Huble is a global organization. Today we started our sessions in Singapore with an interview with SingSpot. We have got myself now, also speaking to John, who is based in Singapore. We're moving across to Dublin a little bit later, and then ending the day in the US East Coast with the team from HubSpot in Boston and our employees over in Chicago. So that's 15 different sessions today. 22 different speakers. You've got over 500 people registered for today and attending. Those are sales people, service people, marketing people, customer experience people. We really, really appreciate your attention and time today joining us. And for those of you that did attend the previous session, you will know that there is a competition running. I'll give you more information right at the end, but look out for those quotes that you want to post onto LinkedIn a little bit later with our hashtag Grow20. So without further ado, I would like to introduce you to John. John is heads up marketing team for Stripe in the Asia Pac. Good afternoon, John.
Yeah, good afternoon. First of all, thank you so much to you and the entire Huble team for having me here today. And also kudos for a fantastically run event so far. Like you said, 3 years running and getting stronger every year. So great to see. I am a little bit nervous that you have a whiteboard behind you, which leads me to believe you're going to be asking some really complex questions. So as I mentioned to you before, depending how difficult they are, I may conveniently have Wi-Fi challenges. No, in all seriousness, looking forward to today's discussion, certainly on a topic that's on many businesses' minds, and eager to jump in.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much. Yeah, I'll try and maybe do a bit of a Rand Fishkin thing later. I can do a whiteboard session behind me. It is my first. It is my first time back in our office, actually, in 7 months. I thought let's not test that home internet too much when you've got over 500 people on a conference. So, John, I gave you a very, very brief overview. I know you spent a decade at Google. You're currently at Stripe. Maybe just to get started, just kind of give the audience a little bit of an overview of your background.
Sure, absolutely. So as Daryn mentioned, I lead marketing for Stripe across Asia Pacific. Hopefully many of you are already Stripe users, or at least know about Stripe. For those of you who might not be as familiar with the company, we're essentially payments infrastructure for the internet. And what that means in simple terms is we work with millions of businesses to make it easy for them, again, whether you're SMB, startup, all the way to Fortune 500 companies like Amazon, to essentially manage their payments, scale internationally, and essentially run effective online businesses. So I've been with Stripe a bit over 2 years, based out of Singapore. Prior to that, I was with Google, as Daryn mentioned, for nearly a decade, primarily here in APAC. And when I moved across to Singapore with Google, we were around 25 people in the office. And when I left around 2 years ago, we were around 2,500. So it was really great to also see, literal 100x growth of a company, both the challenges that went along with that, but also the fantastic growth stories there. So now I spend a lot of my days working with businesses, consulting on payments and just growth in general. So happy to share some insights today.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks so much. So let's get straight into some questions. Before we do, though, I just want to let the audience know, if you do have a question, please do post it into the Q&A section on your webinar at the bottom. I will be monitoring those, and if we have time at the end, because we've only got 30 minutes, I'll answer some of those questions, or we can always get back to you afterwards. So I think, there is a lot of change in this year in particular, but, online payments and so on have been progressing decade on decade on decade anyway. But I mean, like, in terms of this year, 2020, what are those big changes you've seen in commerce? In particular, like, there's obviously B2C trends. I'm also interested in maybe some B2B changes that you're seeing when it comes to online commerce.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's certainly been a challenging year for many, but also a dynamic year for the broader industry as a whole. And I hate using terms like the new normal and unprecedented disruption, but the reality is that is the reality and the truth. It really has been an unprecedented disruption in terms of modern day commerce. And what we're seeing both from a Stripe perspective, but also just broadly in the industry, it feels like years of e-commerce acceleration have happened in mere weeks. And this is not true just in Asia, of course, but globally. A few stats. If you look at Latin America, in March, I think Visa reported that 13 million of their cardholders made their first ever online purchase. 13 million, and so that's an entirely new population coming online, and we're seeing that in other economies around the world as well. You look at China. China already had one of the largest online grocery markets in the world that grew by around 30% last year. This year is expected to grow by 60%, so again, double that growth rate. And I think two kind of consumer reports or stats that really have stood out to me was, one, global consumers say that even after the pandemic ends, they still expect to be shopping more online. And 40% of them say that even when lockdowns in their various markets end, 40% still don't expect to visit brick and mortar shops for at least some time. And so if you're a business, this has immense implications on how you operate, how you market, how you grow. And let's say if you are a brick and mortar business where online may have been, let's say, a complement, you're soon seeing that online is becoming increasingly core to your business, not just a complement. And if you were, say, an internet first business to begin with, you're waking up and seeing, wait a minute, this space is getting a lot more crowded. And so how do you adapt? How do you think about everything from adapting your logistics, your real estate costs, your customer experience, your payments? And I'll say that the kind of two things that have really stood out is when we think about changing customer expectations, I think a lot of businesses right now are obsessed with how do you differentiate and elevate that experience? Because what they're running into, again, within increasingly crowded spaces, we're seeing a lot of people coming online selling the same products and services that they're selling. And so you don't necessarily want to get into this, multi-competitor price war, but you need to figure out how to differentiate. And a lot of folks are thinking, how do you do that through customer experience and through removing friction? And then on the B2B side, as you think about how do you pay your suppliers and also take payments, particularly for small business, a lot of what's on people's mind is cash flow. MasterCard did a recent report, actually quite interesting to read for small businesses, primarily North America, but I think the learnings are broadly applicable. And that's to say that a large percentage of small businesses are literally one missed payment away from going out of business, which is a very scary thought, but a very serious thought for commerce in general. And so if you're a small business, you're thinking, how do I avoid that? And correspondingly, what's happened is there's been this massive increase in digitization of payment. So whereas before you may have been fine with cash and checks and you were okay with the kind of inefficiencies there, and maybe it's not as secure. Maybe you get paid in, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. Now you just don't have that luxury to be that lax. And so there's a lot of changing to online payments, which are more instant and more secure. And similarly, in terms of you paying your suppliers, you're starting to think a lot more about credit. Can I actually have corporate cards to give myself more time to pay? And then Stripe services like card up as well to kind of get me that extra buffer time. So you're really kind of arbitraging. You're saying, can I get paid sooner, but then can I pay others with some more time so my cash flow increases? So again, there's fundamental shifts in people's mindsets and commerce more broadly.
Yeah, I mean, like, there are a couple of things that you said there that I think is so relevant. When you think of differentiation, as you were saying, so if you look at some of the world's most successful businesses up to this point, their differentiation when it came to retail was based on the real estate that they had. So if you're looking at the examples of McDonald's and Starbucks and so on, that's what made them successful. But now when you sell in widgets online and somebody else is selling widgets online, how do you differentiate? And you're right, customer experience is so important. And you don't want to fail at that last minute where they've actually decided to select you as a brand and then suddenly it fails when it comes to payment. So really, really like that point. I think the other thing when it comes to B2B that I've seen is, around the world, you have seen skill shortages, certain countries, certain cities that have had skill shortages. Now suddenly, when everybody's worked out that remote working is actually works. So you can hire staff that don't have to be in your city anymore. And that means that you got staff that need to make purchases 24 hours a day. You cannot, when you're a business to business, you've got to enable self-service and B2B e-commerce, because otherwise there are going to be people that make buying decisions that are asleep, and you're asleep when they want to make that buying decision. So yeah, totally support what you were saying. Industries, companies that you've seen that have really managed to outperform during this period, are there any that stand out?
Sure. So, I mean, I think the common sense would dictate that certain industries have met more challenges. So, for example, travel, hospitality, certainly taken a hit. Although some companies like Airbnb have managed to really adapt fairly quickly. Other industries, say online grocery, certain kind of e-commerce verticals, have seen massive spikes, and that brings a whole other set of challenges, again, with logistics and keeping up with demand. But I tend to look at this question a bit separately from industry and more so from the fact of mindset, because I think the businesses that have done well are the businesses that have been adaptive. And I think how much you can adapt is essentially the competitive advantage in business and particularly commerce going forward. And it's kind of important to understand what being adaptive means, because people have very different definitions. And I think the best that I've kind of read is Kate Christensen, I think around 4 years or so, put out an article, and she kind of compared being agile to being adaptable to being adaptive. And agile oftentimes is more speed. Can you get things done quickly, move in a nimble manner? The challenge is speed sometimes isn't the right necessity. Sometimes you actually need to slow down. Whereas adaptable, it's more, can you change? And so think of it more like a dining table that's expandable. You seat 4 people. Necessary, you can put up the sides and seat 6 people. Whereas being adaptive is really where you want to be, because that's more is change in your DNA. Can you respond quickly? Is it a part of your mental model? Is it a part of your investment mindset? And I think folks need to kind of understand 2 things in particular, which is you need to have the right infrastructure and right partners to actually be adaptive, because oftentimes you need to rely on an ecosystem of people. You can't just, fully transform overnight. It's just not feasible. So you need to make the right infrastructure investments now. And second, you also have to have the right mental model, both from a leadership standpoint, but also trickling all throughout the organization, to have that kind of forward-thinking change first aspect. Because really, it's the folks who are quickest to respond to disruption, who can actually see disruption as opportunity, regardless of industry, those are the folks that are going to be doing well and seeing, you know, the triple-digit growth when others are going to stagnate.
It's yeah, amazing that what you just said. You've just kind of promoted my next session straight after this on digital maturity. So,
there you go.
but yeah, you know, a story from my side there. You know, we rolled out quite an elaborate project management system 2-3 years ago, and you know, we got a fair amount of pushback from the staff at Huble because they thought, you know, well, why can't I just walk over to that person and tell them that I'm finished my task? Why do I have to go onto the system and mark it as done and assign it to the next person and so on? But seeing the change and actually preparing for it, the day that we were told we weren't allowed to come back into the office, nothing changed for us. Everything carried on running smoothly. And where we saw others scrambling to adapt, you know, I think it's so important to get ahead of that curve. So, you know, I use the example here of project management technology, but there's lots of technology that helps people adapt. What are some of those examples?
Sure. I mean, look, I think CX technology in general, when we go back to the point around adapting and differentiating, I mean, it's booming investments for many. It's a booming industry, and I think many companies are actually funneling investment in that direction. I think the latest IDC report I saw said, I think in 2022 we're going to see, you know, nearly $650 billion spent just on CX technology, of which, of course, payments is an important part. And so oftentimes a lot of businesses kind of come to Stripe and they want to understand how can technology help them. And, you know, one simple example is if you just look at your standard checkout flow, if you're, again, engaged in online commerce, in theory, a checkout flow should be seamless, where if someone has the money to buy a product, they are not fraudulent, they go to your site, again, whether B2B, B2C, they make that transaction, and then, you know, goods received, money in the bank, fantastic, you know, roses everywhere, fireworks, great. That's not the reality of the world. And essentially every day what we see is just money leaking out of businesses. POTS, for one, checkout abandonment rates are nearly 80% globally. Worst region being in Asia. So that's already a lot of money out of your potential revenue that's gone. Then when you look at online transactions, 2% on average tend to be fraudulent. So that's more money gone. And then when you look at acceptance online, a lot of what people don't realize that in the kind of physical card present world, when you're paying, say, with a credit card, acceptance rates are generally quite high, but online, you can see acceptance rates that are 10% less. So again, across that entire interaction, you've just significantly lost a lot of potential revenue. And I think the folks are using technology to say on the checkout side, improve conversions by doing everything from autofill, offering different currencies, seamlessly different local payment methods. Let's say you're selling it to Malaysia, you know, FPX as an example, real-time card validation. That can just alone increase your checkout completion markedly. Then when you get to fraud, having smart tools that are based on machine learning can again save you a lot of money, and you're not really doing anything yourself. This is all running in the background for you. And then lastly, in terms of technology to help increase acceptance rates, again, like if you're using the right technology, you don't have to do anything. A lot of the modern day technology will just be smart about when it optimizes and retries acceptance rates. I think that Stripe in particular prides itself on really strong authorization rates and real-time retries. But again, like businesses who are using technology without having to spend time of precious time day to day, again, are the ones that are getting ahead, particularly from a payment standpoint.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you mentioned something there that stood out for me was around security. I think I speak to businesses every day, and it's one of the things they worry about. Okay, if we're going to create a B2B self-service portal, we're going to be taking huge transactions. It's not going to be a $9.99 Amazon purchase, and then for the kind of retail businesses, the ones that normal B2C, it's a concern as well. Are there any things that businesses should watch out for when it comes to security?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the two biggest mistakes folks make are, one, they wait until it's too late. I can't tell you the number of folks that only start to make these smart investments after an attack has happened, and it's unfortunate at times, because sometimes the attack is just so sophisticated, it might set them back, several quarters in terms of growth. So one, please do not wait until it's too late. Going back to that first point around making infrastructure investments now to safeguard against possible disruption in the future. So I think that's one. The second is, we still have a lot of folks that I see using kind of legacy rules-based tools that kind of oversimplify and that are either too lax. And so to your point, they're letting in, fraudulent fraudsters who are becoming more sophisticated day by day. And fraud's expensive, right? I mean, not only are you going to be on the hook you've lost, let's say you're selling a physical product, you've lost that product, then you have to give a refund, then you have to pay a chargeback fee. I mean, fraud can actually put a company out of business, right? And so you don't want a tool that's too lax, but at the same time, you don't want a tool that's too conservative, because otherwise you're just leaving money on the table if you have all these false positives and flagging people who are not actually fraudsters as fraudsters. And so, I mean, the main takeaway here is for every business on the call, go back and just have a look at your fraud rules and your tools. I mean, you really should be having a tool that uses machine learning and that adapts the needs of your unique business, not kind of generic fraud protection, your unique business, and that trains on a lot of data. A lot of companies will say machine learning, machine learning, machine learning. The strength of machine learning is based on the quality and breadth, and ideally global breadth of your data set. So make sure that, again, the companies and tools you use have that breadth.
Cool. So naturally, since we got you on the webinar, Stripe has all of this built in, and many of the people on the call today either already use HubSpot or are considering using HubSpot. Stripe has an amazing integration with HubSpot. Stripe also has an amazing integration with Shopify or powers Shopify, and HubSpot has an amazing integration with Shopify. So do you want to just give us a little bit? We've got the last few minutes of the webinar, but an overview of how Stripe and HubSpot work together.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, I'm definitely a fan of the HubSpot Stripe integration, and certainly the partnership of the companies over the years. I think the integration is fairly straightforward, and what it does is it allows particularly sales folks to integrate some aspects of Stripe checkout and essentially seamlessly send kind of beautiful and easy to understand quotations to their customers, which can then get paid in real time, say via credit card. So you're essentially going back to that first point around decreased time of transactions. You're essentially modernizing away from the constant back and forth of, you emailed an invoice, or you emailed a quote, and then you have to go back and do a PO, and then you send PO, and then someone takes another 30 days to pay you. And all of that is at this point a little bit archaic. And so how do you essentially remove friction and increase velocity? And I think the HubSpot Stripe integration allows you to do that fairly seamlessly. And we have integration, say, even with Xero. I think many folks on the call hopefully also know Xero. I think one of the things that they saw is their customers, after the integration, Stripe integration with Xero, got paid 14 days on average quicker. And so again, when you think about Stripe integration with HubSpot, how can you decrease that time to payment and make it easy for everyone? Essentially win-win.
Cool. Okay, awesome. So in terms of the day is all about growth, any kind of closing tips, pointers, advice around growth, and then we might have time for one or two questions, maybe not. But if anybody, just a reminder, anybody in the audience wants to ask a question, please do. But yeah, John, any closing remarks?
Yeah, I'd say a couple of things. We are in a chat with Nicholas Kantopoulos, who leads marketing for Adobe DX. He was on a webinar we were hosting a few weeks ago, and I think one of the things which he said I appreciate, and that is old process multiplied by new technology basically equals expensive old process. And so you don't necessarily want to be in a situation as a business where you adopt all this fancy new technology, but at the same time, you don't change your operating rhythms, and you don't actually bring on the right partners as well to help you navigate that change. And kind of related to that is, and now it really is a time again to be making those infrastructure investments. You know, when you think about something like international expansion, you don't want to wake up one day and let's say you realize your domestic demand has been significantly declined, say maybe due to a lockdown or a pandemic, and you want to kind of hedge with international selling, and you're seeing all your competitors sell internationally, but you didn't make the investments early enough to actually just seamlessly, you know, turn on international selling. So really make those investments now, because they will reap significant benefits to you down the line. And of course, don't do this all of yourself. You know, that's why, again, I love the fact that Huble just has grown so much and has helped so many clients over the years, because really having a trusted partner to help you along this journey and redefine processes is really critical.
Cool, thanks. Okay, so we've got time for one very quick question. You kind of mentioned there around being able to go global. So there are different payment options based on, you know, what country you're in. So, you know, being here in South Africa, there are certain payment options that you can do in store and they reflect online. So does Stripe work everywhere? Does Stripe work in places like South Africa where we are, or is it kind of more US and the big emerging markets where Stripe is most effective?
Sure. So right now we are live for merchants in 41 different countries. So if you go to stripe.com/global, you'll see the full list. And then we also allow you to accept payments from consumers in nearly 200 separate markets. So certainly global coverage, global reach, and along with that, a number of global payment methods as well. Everything from Ideal to FPX, BEX, direct debit, you name it. So I think that is definitely one of the aspects we pride ourselves on. It's that kind of global reach, which these days has become increasingly more important. And the last thing I'll say on that is, I'm probably going to give you more of an answer than you banked on, but the whole kind of topic of global expansion is an interesting one, because I think years ago you think of globalization more from the lens of this, you know, big multinational. You can imagine almost a cover of The Economist with some like large company dipping their hands into different markets on the map. But the reality is with internet and technology, you know, any business from day one can go global, and many companies are doing just that. But watch out for things like regulation, because that's where oftentimes folks get tripped up. So again, work with the right partners to help you navigate that more seamlessly.
Cool, awesome. Well, thank you so much, John. It's been an absolutely great session, and I see that there has been, you know, the audience that has been on here has stayed on the whole time. So thank you so much to the audience for staying on with us. Right, so a little bit about the competition that we are running today. It is very simple to enter. All you need to do is head over to LinkedIn, post your key takeaway from any of the sessions today, along with the hashtag Grow20. We're giving away a pair of Apple EarPods, and we will pick a lucky winner at the end of the day, and you may be owner of one of those sets of Apple EarPods. The other thing to note is coming up next are 2 more sessions that are starting in the next 15 minutes. So check your email for the links to those sessions. The one is hosted by myself on digital maturity, and there is another event on PR, inbound PR in the post-COVID world. So you can join one of those. But with that, once again, thanks so much, John. Have a good evening as you head off. I am running this for another 12 hours today, and looking forward to learning a whole bunch more from other speakers. But I think they've got a high standard to live up to now. You didn't disappoint at all. Thanks so much.
Fantastic. Thanks again, Daryn, for the invite. And again, all the best for the rest of the sessions. And thanks for all those who attended today. All the best. Bye-bye.
Bye.